Hi, I'm Chris Clark, publisher of NACD Directorship magazine, and this is BoardVision. Today's topic is the board as a strategic asset for private companies. And I'm joined today by Scott Decker, partner of KPMG's Private Markets Group, and Stuart Levine, director of Broadridge Financial. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
I'm going to jump right in this morning, and I'm going to start with Stuart. And private companies are generally deemed to be more nimble and more focused on the long term than their public company counterparts. You've been on both private company boards and public company boards for many years. Is that statement, that is not mine, do you find that to be true or partially true?
Yeah, I think it's partially true. The fact of the matter is that I've been on boards of privately held companies that have had great aspirations and invested for the long term and had, I'll call it, realistic short-term goals. But when we talk about strategy, it's not one size fits all. It really is determined by the leadership of the company and the aspirations of the shareholders. And so I think we as the board just have to encourage a strategic planning process that never loses that innovative opportunity that can really create new markets.
Scott, given what Stuart just said, in your experience, and you spend a lot of time in boardrooms, both
Sure.
private and public, and given your recent study that KPMG did with Forbes Insights, what do you really, do you believe that those private companies are recovering faster than their counterparts?
You can look at forecasts from governmental agencies, and they talk about growth of 1.9%, 2.2%. Most times you're seeing somewhere between 2 and 2.5% growth projected for the U.S. And what we saw in companies is that there was 23% of the private company executives that we surveyed were projecting more than a 20% growth. And the average was around 6%. So something far in excess of what the U.S. as a whole is doing. I talked recently to a CEO who had been a public company, and they took it private because of the pressures, the regulatory issues they had to face. He used the word stealth, that they were able to move without having to broadcast it to their competitors. They were able to think about things and really do the strategic right thing as opposed to what does an analyst want them to do, or what does the news, how does the news prompt them to go?
Okay, well, you're going to enjoy this segment. I want you to both put in your Clint Eastwood persona. And Scott, you're the private company, and let's say a larger private company. Stuart, Clint Eastwood hat, family-owned company. Now, you've got a very proactive, almost aggressive, governance-savvy director. And again, in the context of an asset, a real asset, give me the good, bad, and the ugly of having that person on your board.
Well,
and there could be only good, by the way. I'm not saying you have to give me the bad.
Yeah, well, I think as a private company, having board members that have, especially specific types of experience. So if you're looking to go international, have that board member have knowledge and experience in expanding internationally. It's true. And if you have those types, the things you can do, the vision you can get from those people is great. I mean, it's absolutely worth it. If you're lacking from a financial literacy perspective in your boardroom, having that financial expert on the board and getting their view of how those things are going to be invaluable. So those are the good. The bad, well, there are.
You still have to fit in.
Yeah, I think the most successful board members are those that actually share the same vision, have the same passion as the company. If it's a medical device company, then they're fascinated by the medical device environment, of what they can do with those devices, the development of new products. They get enthused about it as the management does. I think those are good. But you can always get those directors that they're just there for because it puts it on their resume, and in having directors there that are not going to contribute and not going to advise, that can be the bad part of it if they're just taking up space.
Great, thank you. Clint, number 2.
Well, make my day. Hey, listen, this whole issue of governance, where it gets bad is where a sheriff rides into town saying governance on it and tries to intimidate, let's call it the other board members or leadership of the corporation through, I'll call it incredible fear. That's not what governance is about. From my perspective, what good governance is a director who goes out and learns, has intellectual curiosity, and learns about the regulatory trends, brings them back to the board, and then says, as an example, if we're going to expand to China with some new distribution centers and for our products and services, that we have the knowledge, those governance experts, based on things that are going on with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, as an example. And so there it's more in, I'll call it, a shared learning and educational scenario as opposed to fear and intimidation. So the good to me is shared learning, helping, as Scott points out, if we're going to develop new markets globally, based on real experience, not something you just read in the Wall Street Journal. Everybody does that. And shared learning, not intimidation. I think that's where governance people, frankly, sometimes get a bad reputation, that it's my way, it's very strict.
Or the highway.
Exactly, and I don't think that's the way it should be done.
I think that's a good phrase to close with. On behalf of NACD and KPMG's Private Markets Group, this is BoardVision. Thank you.